Welcome to part 3 and the final part of this tutorial series where we're creating this cute monster character in Blender. So in part 1 we had sculpted the base of the body, and then in part 2 we modeled the other parts of the character. So in this part we're going to be doing the lighting and the materials and the rendering and the compositing to get the final finished render. So if you click right up here to go to the render properties, I am going to be using the Cycles rendering engine because Cycles is a bit more realistic. Now you could totally use Blender Eevee if you want to, everything will work fine in Eevee as well, but I will be using Cycles because I do like that Cycles is a little bit more realistic. But if you wanted things to render faster, you could totally do this in Eevee as well. So I'm first going to be adding in an Hdri to get some nice realistic lighting. So I'm going to click right over here on the world properties. And then if you don't already have a new world, you can just click on new to add a new world. And then right here on the color, I'm going to click on the yellow dot and I'm going to change this to environment texture. And then I will click on open to open up an Hdri. So I am going to be using this Monbactal Riverbank 1K Hdri. So this is a free Hdri from polyhaven.com, and I will have the link in the description if you'd like to download it. So I downloaded the 1K version and the HDR version. So once you download the HDRI, you can go to wherever you have downloaded it, and I'm just going to double click on the HDRI to add it in. And this is going to give us some nice realistic lighting and reflections on the character. So if I hold down the Z button, I can move my mouse up to the rendered view, and we can see what this looks like. So it's giving us some nice soft lighting all around the character. And also when we add the materials, the character will be a little bit reflective, so it'll kind of reflect a little bit of the environment and it'll just make it look much more realistic. Now I don't really want to be able to see the background because it is a bit distracting, so I'm going to click right over here on the render properties, and then I'm going to open up the film tab, and then I'm going to check mark the transparent button, and that way the HDRI is still there, but I just can't see it in the background. And then I'm also going to scroll down here to the color management, and on the view transform, I'm going to set it to filmic, and then also on the look here, I'm going to set this to very high contrast. So this is going to make things a bit more contrasty, so you can see the lights are a bit lighter, the darks are a bit darker, and then everything is a little bit more saturated. And it'll just kind of pop out the colors and make the final render look nicer. Let's press Ctrl S again to save the project. So now I want to add a camera, so I'm going to press Shift A, and let's go right down here and just add a camera. And then I'm just going to move my view to where I want the camera to be, and then I'm going to press Control Alt Numpad 0. That is going to bring the camera to where we are. And then if you select the camera by just clicking on it right here, you can press G to grab and you can move it around. Now I only want to preview what's inside the camera's view. I don't want Blender to have to render everything else. So in the camera view, you can press Control B. That's going to add this boundary, and I can just drag out a box here, drag around the camera and let go. This way now it's only going to render what is in the camera's view, and so the preview will be faster. And if you're in Blender Eevee, then this feature doesn't work, but in Cycles Render, it will help to speed up the render preview. Now I want this image to be a square image, so I'm going to click right over here on the output properties. Now you can set the resolution to whatever you want. I want the image to be pretty high resolution, so I'm going to set this to 2560 by 2560 pixels. And so that is going to be a nice big image. But if you want the render to be faster, you could of course turn this down. You could just turn it to like 1920 by 1920. That would be a bit smaller. And then I'm also going to double tap the R key. That's going to enable the trackball rotation, and I can hold down the Shift key to make my movements more sensitive, place the camera there, and then I can press G to grab and move the camera up. Now I also want to turn up the focal length of the camera, so with the camera selected you can click right here to go to the object data properties. And then right up here underneath the lens, on the focal length right here, I'm going to turn this up to like an 80, and this is going to make everything look just a little bit more flat, and I do think it looks nicer. And then you can see this is kind of zoomed in too much, so to zoom out the camera, I can press the G key to move the camera, and then I can double tap the Z key. That is going to move the camera in and out, and I can just kind of move that around, and I'm going to stick it right there. So just kind of place the camera so it's pointed at the character. So now let's set up some lighting. So to set up the lighting, I'm going to press Shift A, and let's go right down here to light, and I'm going to add an area light. So I first want to make some rim lights on the back, and that's going to kind of pop the character out from the background. So I'm going to hold down the Z button, go back into the solid view, and then I'm going to press 7 on the numpad. That's going to go to top view. And I can press G to grab. I'm going to move the light over, and then let's press 3 on the numpad for side view, and I can kind of rotate the rim light. rotate that up so it's pointed at the character, and then you can hit 7 on the numpad for top view, and I want to rotate the light over so it is facing the character. And I think I will bring it over a little bit and then rotate that over. And then I will scale the rim light up a bit. Now I want this rim light to be lighting up the whole side of the character. So what I'm going to do is click on the shape here, and I'm going to change this from square to a rectangle. So I can now play around with the size X and the size Y, and I want to bring this up so that it is very long. And I think I might make it a little bit thinner, so something like that. So I can go into the camera view, hold down the Z button, go up into the rendered view, and I can see what that's looking like. Now it's not very bright, so I'm going to turn the power up quite a bit so it is much brighter. And I'm going to type in a specific value, so I'm going to turn the power up to like a 3000. So now if you zoom in here and look kind of at the edge, you can see there is that bright light on the edge of the character. And then right here on the color, I'm also going to make this a very bright color and make it slightly blue, because I do think a slightly blue rim light looks pretty good. And then I want to duplicate this rim light and make one more on the other side. So I'm going to press 7 on the numpad for top view, and I can press Shift D to duplicate, and then R to rotate, and I'm going to rotate this over and make a second rim light. So then press 0 on the numpad to go into the camera view, and you can see we have that other rim light on the other side. So I now want to add one main light kind of over here. So I'm going to hold down the Z button, go back to the solid view, and I can press 7 on the numpad for top view. So with this light selected, I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate it, and I'm going to stick another one there. And then I'm going to rotate this light over, and this is going to be kind of a main light just shining on the character and lighting him up. So then on this light right here, I want to turn the power up even more. So I'm going to turn the power up to like 5000 on this one. And then also on the color here, I want to make this kind of a natural, kind of yellowish, orangish light. So something like that. So I can go into the camera view, hold down the Z button, go up into the rendered view, and we can see how that's looking. So now we have a nice bright light shining on the character. So now that we have some nice lighting, we can add the materials. So I'm going to select the main character object, and then let's click right over here to go to the shading tab. So in the shading tab, I have the shader nodes right here, and then I have the 3D space right here, and I'm in the rendered view so I can preview the character. So I'm going to click on the new button to create a new material, and I can just call this like skin, because this is going to be the character's skin. And so for the character's skin, I want to go right here to the base color of the principled shader, and I want to make this kind of a purplish color. And if you'd like to use the same exact color that I'm using, I'm going to be using a hex value of 7500D7. So that is the purple color that I'm using for the character. Now I also want the skin to be a bit more shiny, so I'm going to take the roughness, and I'm going to turn the roughness down to like a 0.35. Just a 0.35, so it's a bit more shiny. And then I also want to turn up the subsurface, so the subsurface scattering, and this is going to allow some light to go through the character's skin. You can especially see it right there on the ear, so if I turn up the subsurface, it looks much more like skin, and it's allowing light to go through. So I'm going to turn the subsurface to like a 0.15, so there's just a little bit of subsurface. And then right here on the subsurface color, I'm going to click on the white tab right here for the subsurface color, and I'm going to make this a bright blue color. And if you want to use the same color that I'm using over here on the hex value, you can type in 005BE7. So that is the color that I'm using for the subsurface. So now let's add the eye material. So I'm going to select the eye, and then let's click on new, and I can just rename this like eye white. All right, eye white. Now on the base color, I'm going to make sure this is fully white, and then I'm going to turn the roughness value all the way to 0 so it's very shiny. And then I'm going to click on the other eye. Let's click on the drop down right here, and I'm going to add the eye white. Now I need to add the pupils, so I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to press the tab key to go into edit mode, and I will hold down the Z button and go back into solid view so I can see this better. So what I'm going to do now is click right up here to go to the face select, and then I'm going to hold down the Alt key and just select right there, and that is going to select the ring of faces. And then I can also press B for the box select, and I'm just going to box select these faces right here. So these are the faces that I want to add the pupil material to. So then what I can do is I can click right over here to go to the material properties, and you can see we have material slots within this object. So I'm going to click on the plus right here to add a new material in the slot, and then I'm going to click right here on the drop down, and I want to first add the eyes white material. Now I want to duplicate this material so that it is a separate material. So I'm going to click on this button right here. It looks like two pieces of paper. That's going to duplicate the material, and then I can just rename this. So I'm going to rename this to eyes black. So now this is a separate material, but it still has the same data. So then right here on the base color, I want to make the eyes black be a color of fully black, and I will leave the roughness to 0. Now I'm going to hold down the Z button, go up into the rendered view, and you can see nothing really has changed, and that is because we need to assign this material to those faces. So we still have those faces selected, so just select the eye black, and then you can click on the assign button. And then I can tab to go back to object mode, and you can see now we have the pupil. So I want to do the same thing for the other eye. So I'm going to hold down the Z button, go back into the solid view, and then I can press the tab key to go into edit mode. So I'm going to press A to deselect everything, and then I can hold down the Alt key and just select that ring of faces. And then I can press B for the box select and just box select those faces there. So then right here in the object's material slots, I can click on the plus to add a new material, and then I can click on the drop down, and I'm going to add the eyes black material. And then that part is selected, so I can click on the assign button, and then I can press tab to go back to object mode. And if I hold down the Z button and go up into the rendered view, we now have the character's eyes. So that is looking great. Now I'm going to hold down the Z button and go into the material preview. You can see the character is basically looking forward, but I want the character's eyes to look right up at us. So I'm going to select this object, hold down the shift key and select this object. Now I want to rotate the eyes over, but I want to rotate them individually. So I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel and scroll over and then click right here on the transform pivot point, and I want to change this to individual origins. This way I can double tap the R key. That's going to turn on the trackball rotation, and you can see each eye is rotating individually. So I want to just rotate this over so that the eyes are looking right at us, and then click to place that there. And then I can click right here on the transform pivot point, and I'm going to change this back to the median point. So if I hold down the Z button, go up into the rendered view, the character is now looking right at us. Now you can see that the character's pupils are very, very black, and I want to add a little highlight to actually make the character look more alive. So to do this, I'm going to go right back here to the layout, and then I can hold down the Z button and go into the solid view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Shift A, and let's go here to light, and I'm going to add another area light. And I can press G to grab, bring this over, and then R to rotate. We're just going to rotate this light over, and we're going to point it right at the eyes from the very front. And I think I might go to the top here and just kind of rotate it over slightly so it's slightly over on this side. So the eyes are going to reflect this light, and then it's going to make the eyes look much more alive. So if I hold down the Z button, go up into the rendered view, if I zoom in here, you can see those reflections just a little bit. And to be able to preview this better, I'm going to press Control B in the camera. I'm going to drag a box around the eyes and then let go. That's just going to add a boundary right there so that I can just see the eyes. It'll just render the eyes. So if I now just select the light, I can press G to grab and I can move it around. And if you look right in there, you can see there is the eyes. Now right over here, if you go to the object data properties, you can change the light settings. So I want to turn the size up, and that is going to make the light bigger. And then I want to make it much more strong. So let's turn up the power, and that way it's going to be brighter. And I'm going to turn the power up to like 1000 so that it is very bright. Now you can see it looks like squares, and I want it to instead look like circles. So if you click right here on the shape of the light, I'm going to click on this and I'm going to change it to disk instead. And now it is actually a circular shape. And then you can scale it up if you need to with the size there. So now if I press Control B, drag a box around the entire camera so I can preview that, I think I want to make the size a bit smaller. And also that is a little bit bright, so maybe on the power here, I'll just change this to like an 800, maybe even just like a 600, so it's not quite as bright. But now if you zoom in there, you can see we have a nice highlight on the eyes, and that is really going to make the character look more alive. All right, so now let's continue with the materials. So I'm going to click back here on the shading tab to go to the shader nodes, and let's press Ctrl S to save. So we just have a few more materials left. So I'm first going to select the tongue. Let's click on new here, and then I can just rename this material to tongue. So then right here on the base color, I want to make this a red color for the tongue. And then I want to make this red color a little bit darker as well. Now I want to give this material some subsurface scattering so that it looks more fleshy. So right here on the subsurface, I'm going to turn this up to like a 0.15. So that way it'll allow a bit of light to go through, and that looks much more like a tongue. It looks much more fleshy. And then right here on the roughness, I'm also going to turn this down to like a 0.25, just a 0.25 there on the roughness. So it's a bit more shiny, and that makes the tongue look a bit more wet. And then right here on the subsurface color, I don't want this to be white, so I'm going to make this a red color, not super saturated, and then make it a bit darker. So there we go, that looks much more like a tongue material. So now I want to create the material for the teeth. So I'm going to select the teeth. Let's click on new here. We can just rename this material to teeth. And then I want to turn the roughness down a little bit. So I'm going to turn the roughness down to like a 0.35 so that there's just a little bit shiny. So I'll just turn that to like a 0.35. And then on the base color here, I'm just going to make this a slightly yellow color. So the teeth are slightly yellow. Maybe I'll turn the roughness down a little bit more to like a 0.2 so these teeth are just a little bit more shiny. And then let's also create a material for the eyebrows. So I'm going to click on the eyebrows, click on new. I can just rename this material. And then for this material, I want to make the base color fully black. And then I do want to make it a little bit shiny as well, just to make it look kind of cartoony. So I'll turn the roughness value to like a 0.4. And then we just have this material left. So I'm going to click on the hair. Let's click on new here, and I can just rename this material to hair. And then for the hair color, I want to make this a blue color. I think blue looks pretty nice, so I'm going to make this a bright blue color. And then I do want to make the hair just a little bit shiny, so I'm going to turn the roughness to like a 0.4. Of course, you could play around with any hair color that you want. Green looks kind of funny. That's kind of cool. Also, red is kind of cool, but I like a blue color. And there we go. So the cute monster character is finished. So there is one more thing I want to add into the 3D scene. I want to add a ground plane, and then I want to make the ground plane be a shadow catcher. And this way there'll just be a little bit of a shadow underneath the character. So I'm going to hop back over here to the layout, and then I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go up here to mesh, and I'm going to add a plane. I can press S to scale. Let's scale the plane up, and I can press G to grab and bring it down on the Z axis. And I just want to stick it right there. Let's hold down the Z button and go back to the solid view, and I can navigate down here, and then I can press G to grab, bring it up and down on the Z axis, and just stick it right there. So that is pretty good. And scale it up a little bit. Now the shadow catcher works differently in Eevee and Cycles. So if you're using Cycles render, you can do this the way that I'm going to do it. If you are using Blender Eevee though, then you can check out a tutorial that I've created on how to create a shadow catcher in Cycles and Eevee, and you can learn how to create it in Eevee. Or if you don't want to create the shadow catcher, no problem. It's not going to affect the render that much, but it does make it look a little bit nicer. So just select the object, and if I hold down the Z button, go up into the rendered view, we can preview this in the rendered view. So to make this a shadow catcher with the object selected, I'm going to go right over here to the object properties, and then I'm going to open up the visibility tab right here. Now right here under mask, I can just click on shadow catcher. And again, for Blender Eevee, this isn't really going to work. So if you want to do this in Blender Eevee, check out my other tutorial on how to create a shadow catcher in Blender Eevee. So now if I zoom in here, you can see there's just a little bit of a shadow, but then the rest of the object is transparent. But you can just see a tiny little bit of a shadow there, kind of around the feet. Now, even though this material appears to be transparent, if you look kind of at the bottom of the character, it is actually reflecting a ton of light. And that is because on default, it is just a white material. So I want to change that. So with the object still selected, I'm going to click right over here to the material properties, and I can click on new, and I can just rename this material to like ground. And then right here on the base color, I'm just going to make this fully black. And that way it's not going to be quite as reflective. You can see if I turn the base color all the way up, it's reflecting the light because it is just a white material, but I want to make this fully black so it's not quite as reflective. So that is looking much better, and now there's not all that white stuff that's shining up on the character. So let's press Ctrl S again to save. So now we can set up some render settings, render the image, and do some compositing. So I'm going to click right over here to the render properties, and I'm going to open up the sampling. Now, because I'm using Cycles render and because I'm using Subsurface Scattering, I'm going to need to use a lot of samples. So I'm going to turn the sample count up to like 400. Now, if this is going to take too long for your computer to render, of course, you can turn the render samples down. And if you want the scene to render much faster, you could also use Blender Eevee. So you can see here's the scene in Blender Eevee. It does look really nice, and it would also render really fast. I want to get the extra realism though, so I'm going to be using the Cycles render engine, and I'll set the samples to 400. And then also something else you can do to make the render faster, if you go to the output properties, you could turn the resolution down, and that'll make a smaller image, but it will render faster. And then one more thing I can do to make the render a bit faster, I can close the sampling, and I'm going to open up the light paths. So if we turn the light paths down, that's going to make it render faster. Now I do want some light paths just so that the render looks a bit realistic, but I can turn these down, and then Blender won't have to calculate as many of the light paths. So I'm going to turn the total down to like 2, I'm going to turn the diffuse down to like 2, and the glossy to 2, and then I can turn the transmission value all the way to 0 as well, and then the transparency I can also turn that all the way to 0. And then I can also turn the filter glossy all the way to 0, and also the reflective and refractive caustics, I can turn both of those to 0 as well, and also the indirect light, turn that to 0. So now that we've turned these way down and we've turned some of these things off, Blender will be able to render the scene faster. So before you render, press Ctrl S to save, and then to render the final image, you can press F12, or you can click on render, and you can render the animation by clicking right here on render image. And the render has finished. So now let's do some compositing to make the final image look really nice. So I'm gonna hop right over here to the Compositing tab, and then I can click on Use Nodes, and then I'm also gonna just drag this down to hide the timeline because we're not doing any animation. So I have the Node Wrangler add-on turned on, so I can Control Shift and select different nodes, and that is gonna add the viewer node, and then make sure the backdrop is turned on so we can preview the compositing in the background. And if you don't have the Node Wrangler turned on, you can click on Edit and go to the Preferences. And then right over here, if you click on add-ons, you can go up here to the search, and you can search for the Node Wrangler, and then just check mark the Node Wrangler add-on. And then you can close the user preferences. So now that the add-on is turned on, you can Control Shift and select different nodes, and that is going to preview the node. Now you can see the monster is really big in the background, so I'm going to press the V key, that's going to zoom out, and you can also press Alt V and that'll zoom in. So V and Alt V. So now let's do some compositing to make the image look really nice. So I'm going to first hold down the Shift key and right click and drag, and I'm going to drag a line over the wire and then let go, and that is going to add the reroute, and this way I can add nodes right in here and it'll connect it up to the viewer and the composite. So the first thing that I want to do is denoise the image to kind of smooth it out. So I'm going to press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the denoise node, and I can just drop the denoise node right here. And then I can click on the accurate, and I'm just going to change this to fast so it denoises a bit faster. And once the denoise node takes effect, you can see that image looks much more smooth. Now I also want to add a little bit of a glare effect, so let's press Shift A, I'm going to go to the search, and I'm going to search for the glare node, and let's just drop the glare node right here. Now I want to click on the streaks, and I want to instead change this to the fog glow. And then I'm going to click on the quality right here, and I'm going to change this to high quality. So then we'll just wait for this to load up. You can see there's going to be a little bit of a glare around the character, kind of where the brightest areas are. And then I also want to add 2 glares just to make it a little bit brighter. So with the glare node selected, I'll press Shift D to duplicate. Let's drop it there, and that'll add another one. Now the denoise node is making the compositing kind of laggy. So with the denoise node selected, I'm going to press the M key, and that's just going to mute the denoise node. And so the preview will load up much faster, and then right at the end, we can just turn the denoise node back on. So I also want to do a little bit of color correction. So I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the RGB curves, and let's stick this after the glare nodes. So I want to make this a bit more contrasty, so I'm going to click right here and drag a dot and kind of pull it up, and then I can drag another one and bring it down, and that's just going to make it a bit more contrasty. And again, you can see it's taking a little while to composite, so I'm just going to click on the glare node and press M, and then M just to mute those nodes, and that way it'll composite much faster. So I'm just going to bring this out to make that a bit more contrasty and bring that down a bit. And then I can click on the R here for red, and I'm going to bring this up, just add a dot there and bring that up just to add a tiny bit more red. And then I do think I want to add a little bit more blue as well, so I can click on the B here for blue, and then I can click right here and bring a dot out, and I'm just going to bring that dot out a little bit so that there's a tiny bit more blue. All right, so I now want to create a background behind the character. So I'm going to press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for an ellipse mask, and let's stick the ellipse mask right over here. Now if you click on the ellipse mask, you can see there's a square there, and you can drag the width and the height on the ellipse mask, and I'm going to make this a bit bigger. So I'm going to make the ellipse mask about this big, and if you want to preview it, you can Control Shift and select the ellipse mask, and that'll preview it. So we are basically going to create this little circle here, and then we're going to blur it, and then we'll have a nice background. So I want to blur this now, so I'm going to press Shift A, I'm going to go to the search, and I'm going to search for the blur node, and let's stick the blur node right there after the ellipse mask. Now I'm going to click on the X, drag down and let go, and then I can change both values at the same time, and I'm going to change this to 1000. Now this will depend on how big your render is, so if you rendered the image smaller, you may not need to blur it quite as much, but I rendered this as a pretty high quality image, so I'm going to turn it to 1000. And now you can see we have this nice gradient here. Now I want to change the colors because I don't want it to be black and white, so let's press Shift A. I'm going to go to the search, and I'm going to search for a color ramp node, and let's stick the color ramp right here. So I can now click on this black tab, and I'm going to make this black tab a little bit brighter, and I'm going to make it a blue color. So it's basically going to be a dark blue. And then I want to click on the white tab, and I also want to make this a blue color, so I'm going to make it very blue, and I'll make it a bit darker. And we'll just wait for that to composite. So now you can see we have a very nice dark blue gradient for the background. So I now want to Control Shift and select the reroute again so I can preview the final thing. I'm going to press B for the box select, just box select these nodes and bring them up. So I now want to combine the background with the image. So I'm going to press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for an alpha over node, and we're going to drop the alpha over node right in here. So we can use the alpha over node to combine two different images. So I'm going to take the color ramp right here, and I'm going to put that into the top one, and then this RGB curves is going to go into the bottom one. And now we'll just wait for that to load up, and you can see now we have our character with a nice background. And you can also see there's the little shadow there that we added on the ground. And then I want to preview the glare and the denoise, so just select these nodes, hold down the Shift key, select the nodes, and I can press the M key, and that is going to unmute the nodes, and it'll denoise the image and also add the glare. And there we have it. Now I do think the glare is just a little bit too strong, so I'm going to click on this glare node right here, and I'm going to press Control X. So Control X is going to delete the node, but it'll keep the wire plugged up. I'm just going to use one glare node because I think 2 was a little bit too much. And there it is. So there is the final image. So to save this image, you can press F11, or you can also click right up here and go to the image editor. Now we are previewing the render result, but let's click right here on the drop down, and I want to click on the viewer node so we can preview the final compositing. And then to save this image, just click on image and click on save as. And I will just save this as cutemonstercharacter.png, and I'll just save this in a folder with my other files and click on save as image. And that is it. So that is going to finish up this tutorial series. So thank you so much for watching this tutorial series. I hope you learned a lot from it, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. And again, if you'd like to help support me and this channel, then you can check out my Gumroad store and my Patreon page and the YouTube memberships. I'll have the link in the description. And you can also purchase the finished tutorial files on my Gumroad store, and you can also get the tutorial files if you join my Patreon page. And again, the links will be in the description to that. And if you'd like to check out some of my other Blender sculpting tutorials, then I will have a link in the description to my sculpting tutorial playlist where you can learn how to create some other characters. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to see you in a future tutorial.